The courtroom was too bright that morning, too clean, too official, when they called her a fraud. Name's Thatcher Rowan, 52, internal auditor, and I remember the quiet scrape of that small wooden box across the table like it was yesterday. The metal inside caught the sunlight, just so like it had something to say. Ever seen someone silent their whole life, then break a room without a word? I'd love to hear what you would have done. April 2022. Leon County Courthouse, Tallahassee, Florida. They called her a fraud, a fake, a ghost in scrubs who had no place treating veterans or resetting ventilators or walking the quiet back halls of a government hospital. They said she'd falsified records, moved funds, wore a borrowed uniform. That morning in the stiff heat of a Florida spring, Drusilla Evanson sat beneath the buzzing lights of courtroom 3B and didn't say a damn word. She didn't need to. From the second row, I watched her carefully. Not out of loyalty, I'd never known her that well. Not really, but out of something more complicated, shame maybe, or curiosity, or that gut-deep suspicion you feel when a person you thought you'd figured out turns out to have lived a whole life outside your comprehension. Drew was wearing a charcoal gray suit, not the kind you buy for court. The kind you wear because it's the nicest thing in your closet and still smells faintly of antiseptic and dry air from wherever it's been hanging. Her hands were folded loosely in her lap. She didn't blink when the bailiff called her name. She looked at the judge like she was listening for something deeper than words. Judge Inez Callow was the kind of woman who didn't fidget. Tall, with short silver hair and a brow like a steel ruler. She didn't often blink either. But that morning when she turned to Drew and asked if she had anything to submit in her defense, there was a hesitation. Just a beat. Drew reached down beside her chair, picked up a small wooden box, and placed it gently on the defense table. No one moved. The prosecutor, Mel Jarvin, overeager and underexperienced, shifted in his seat. He looked like he'd expected a speech, maybe a tearful plea. Not this. Not something so small. The box was dark walnut, maybe 6 inches wide, the kind that held keepsakes or heirloom jewelry. Drew opened it slowly, her gloves soft against the aged metal hinges. Inside, nestled in black felt, was a single object, a tarnished military medal. I couldn't see the details from where I sat, but I could hear the scrape of wood against laminate as she slid it forward. Judge Callow narrowed her eyes. Jarvin barked. Objection. Your Honor, defense failed to enter this item into the record. Callow raised a hand, silencing him with a flick of her wrist. Mr. Jarvin, she said, when a defendant places a military commendation before this court, you do not interrupt. You make room. There was a long silence then. I noticed the way light from the high windows fell diagonally across the table, dust motes dancing in the air. Drew sat still, her expression unreadable. The metal caught a beam of light and gleamed not brightly, but with the dull weight of something that had seen real time. Callow gestured to the clerk. The young man stepped forward, lifted the metal from its cushion, and carried it over like it was heavier than it looked. He placed it on the bench. Callow leaned in. I watched her mouth tighten as she studied it. A faint scratch down the side. A shape, maybe a triangle, carved into the back plate. Not a design I recognized. Not one you see at parades or pinned to framed photos on someone's fireplace mantel. It didn't look ceremonial. It looked field-made. She looked up at Drew. What is this? Drew only shook her head, slow and silent. She refuses to explain. Your Honor, Jarvin said, trying to reassert control. That box could have come from an antique store on Route 19. This is a stunt. Callow ignored him. She held the medal in her hand for another moment, thumb brushing against the ridged edge, then placed it carefully back on the table. "This court will recess for 30 minutes, she said, voice lower now. "I intend to verify the origin of this object before we proceed." The gavel struck once, sharp, final. The room exhaled. I stood slowly still, watching Drew. She hadn't moved since placing the box down. Her eyes weren't on the judge. They weren't on the prosecutor. They weren't on the gallery of whispering voices. They were locked on the grain of the wood beneath her fingertips. And that's when I noticed him standing at the very back of the courtroom, just inside the doors. He looked to be in his late 20s. Tall, a little out of place in a button-down shirt, and a hesitation that clung to him like heat. His hands were jammed into his pockets. His gaze was fixed on Drew. That was Shepard Evanson, her son. He hadn't been listed as a witness. No mention of him in the filings. I hadn't seen him in any of the hospital records or old holiday newsletters, but I knew him the second I saw his face. He looked like he didn't know whether to stay or walk out before it got worse. Back then, I was still a believer. I believed audits worked. I believed systems could be cleaned like wounds scrubbed until they stopped festering. I believed mostly that people followed protocols because they made sense and that outliers were just data waiting for correction. Then I met Drew. She wasn't on any roster I was ever given. Not under facilities, not tech support. Not even that bloated temporary vendor support category that got trotted out when no one wanted to claim responsibility. But somehow, things around her always functioned. Machines stuttered back to life when she walked into the room. Printers stopped jamming. Cardiac readers blinked into sync like they were grateful for her presence. I remember the first time I really saw her. Not just in passing, but in detail. I was walking the basement hall outside, radiology clipboard in hand, tracing inconsistencies in the equipment maintenance logs. The hallway was dim, those flickering bulbs that make you feel like your memory's lying to you. It always smelled faintly of hand sanitizer and warm plastic. A screen repair had supposedly been logged the day before, but the technician listed didn't exist in our contractor system. And then I saw her. She was crouched beside an outdated cardiac monitor, one of the ones we were supposed to replace 2 fiscal cycles ago, elbow deep in its wiring. No gloves. Her fingers moved like she was rewiring her own memory. Not fast, not flashy, but with the economy of someone who understood where everything belonged without having to think. "What are you doing?" I asked before I realized how accusatory it sounded. She glanced up. No startle, no flinch. Just that small half-smile that's equal parts patience and a challenge. "Patch cable shorted," she said, nodding toward the wall jack. "Kept misreading pulse spikes." "You're not." I paused, checking the badge clipped to her front pocket. It was faded, the photo mostly rubbed off. There was a serial number in the lower corner, tiny and clean, unlike anything I recognized from the systems I'd trained on. "You pick things up," she said. Then she was back to the monitor, twisting a tool the size of a pen. That's when Nurse Rochelle appeared behind me. "Oh, Drew's got it," she said, relaxing visibly. "Then we're fine." "You know her?" I asked, scribbling notes without looking. "Maintenance," she said quickly, too quickly. "Kind of. Sometimes IT. She floats. You'll see." Over the next few weeks, I did. She showed up in operating prep when the biometric scanner failed, her hand moving faster than the diagnostics. She reprogrammed the inventory system's barcodes so that the surgical masks finally matched the actual model in use. Once I caught her recalibrating a heating unit in the NICU, despite no ticket being filed. I asked for her personnel file. Took a week and 3 emails. When it came, it was one printed sheet in a manila folder with coffee stains and a note clipped to the front: civilian contract. Extended. No expiration, no job title, no department head, no signature. Half the field's redacted. I asked HR. She's on legacy status, they said, whatever that meant. When I pressed, I was told, Mr. Rowan, if she's fixing things, let her fix them. Less for you to audit, right? That answer didn't satisfy me. It intrigued me. The day of the Lopez incident, I was 3 weeks into my probationary audit cycle. Dr. Omar Lopez, a man whose confidence was inversely proportional to his willingness to learn anything new, was preparing for a minor outpatient procedure. His surgical printer, a temperamental beast even on good days, decided to spit out half the consent forms as blank pages. He slammed a tray against the wall, cursed in 3 languages, and began berating the intern. Then Drew walked in. She didn't make a sound, just slipped between the scrub nurse and the cabinet crouched by the unit, and pressed 2 buttons in rapid succession. A mechanical click, a low whine, and the printer hummed back to life. Lopez turned mid-tirade and blinked. What did you just do?" "Printer was hungry," she said, not looking at him. "Didn't like the data feed loop." Then she left. I watched Lopez gather himself, smooth his coat, and tell the room he'd fixed it with a hard reboot. No one contradicted him. Later that evening, I caught up to Drew near the east entrance. The sun had dipped low, turning the parking lot into a grid of shadows. She was headed for the lot's far edge, alone as always. "Drew," I called. She turned. "You dropped something," I said, holding up the badge that had slipped from her lab coat pocket. She stepped forward, took it gently. For a second, our fingers brushed. I saw the corner of the badge again. A faint etching, 3 lines forming a triangle. Not printed, but carved in. Just above the serial number that still didn't match anything in our database. "Where'd you learn to fix all that?" I asked. "You pick things up," she repeated. Then she smiled, faint and distant. "Or you remember things you forgot you knew." She walked away before I could ask anything else. It was the kind of morning where everything looked grayer than it should. Not rainy, not overcast, just dull, like the sky had forgotten how to be sky. The kind of morning where you expect nothing and still find yourself disappointed. I was nursing a sinus ache from 2 nights of bad sleep when Marvin Clay called. "Breakfast," he said. "Excuse me, T's Diner. 10 minutes. It's about her." He didn't say Drew's name. He didn't have to. I hadn't seen Marvin in years, not since he retired from VMRC, moved upstate, and slowly disappeared from the admin threads. He was the kind of man you remembered even if you didn't want to. Broad shoulders, slow gait, southern calm like it had been decanted and aged in oak. If anyone knew anything about Drew before she became a ghost. In the hallway, it was him. When I got to T's, he was already seated, booth in the corner by the fogged window. A second coffee cup waited across from him, steam long since given up. "Thatcher," he said, voice warm and flat, like a weathered porch board. "Appreciate you coming." He didn't stand, just gestured to the seat. There was a burger sitting untouched in front of him. Mustard bleeding into the bun, 1 pickle off-center, like it had been nudged and abandoned. The syrup bottle near the napkin dispenser sweated condensation. I sat. "You said it's about her." He nodded, pulling a satchel from beside his knee. "I've got something to show you. Won't take long. Just don't speak till it's over." From the bag, he drew out an old iPad in a rubber case. The screen was smudged, the kind of glass that kept fingerprints like memory. He unlocked it with a code so quick it was clearly muscle memory. Then he tapped a file, turned the screen toward me, and hit play. At first there was nothing. Just static. Dust. The jostle of a handheld cam in a place where it wasn't meant to be used. Then heat. Motion. Sound. Screams blurred under mortar blasts. Voices in English Pashto and something between. A medic was crouched over a soldier with shrapnel in his leg, and another figure knelt beside him, small, steady face streaked with ash and blood. Her voice low but firm, commanding like silence with shape. It was Drew. She looked younger by maybe 10 years, the same calm, the same grip on the world like it was breakable but salvageable. She wasn't wearing any insignia, no rank, no patch, just a flak vest and a baseball cap. She held a syringe like a conductor's baton directing a symphony of makeshift triage. I watched her cut through a uniform sleeve, apply a tourniquet, then shift to another body before the last one had even stilled. The way she moved it was the same. Efficient, precise. The same way she'd recalibrated that ancient ventilator in VMRC with a single turn of the valve, like she could see the inner gears of the world turning and knew exactly where to touch. Marvin let the video run until a frame stilled Drew leaning over a fallen soldier, slipping something into the chest pocket of his vest. "Pause it," he said, and tapped the screen. The frame held. "Zoom," he said again. His fingers expanded the image slowly. The resolution was bad, pixelated, but not indecipherable. Nestled in the soldier's vest was a small medal. Round, bronze, worn. The same medal I'd seen on the defense table just a week ago. The one the judge had lifted with gloved hands and a furrowed brow. The one no one recognized. "She never wore it," Marvin said quietly. "Said it didn't belong to her. But she gave it to him. Said if anyone asked who he was, they'd believe the medal before the face." I leaned back in the booth, staring through the fogged window. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you're the only one I trust to do something with it." I looked at him. "She saved lives out there," he continued. "They pulled her from somewhere deep, probably special projects. No record, no chain of command. She wasn't supposed to be on any list. But when things went sideways, they sent her in. Then when the dust settled, they buried her deeper. She said nothing in court. She wasn't trained to speak. She was trained to act." Marvin reached into the satchel again and pulled out a flash drive. He slid it across the table, its red casing scratched and scuffed. "That video's on here," he said. "And a few others. Testimonies. Not mine, I wasn't there for all of it. But enough to make a dent." I picked up the drive, turned it over in my hand. "You sure about this? If they call her a fake in court," he said, "show them this." Outside, a truck backfired. I flinched. Marvin didn't. He pushed the burger aside and finally sipped his cold coffee. "She fixed machines like she was tuning memory," he said. "Only person I ever saw fix a person the same way." March 2022. VMRC Administration. Tower 14th floor, Lamont. Griner didn't hate Drew. That was the first lie I told myself. If you asked him, I think he'd say he respected her. Respected how she kept her head down, kept the machines running, kept the hallway from caving in on itself. But when the quarterly audit landed on his desk, thick with flags and footnotes, he didn't blink before typing her name into the summary section. Except he didn't type her name. Not really. He typed Yvonne Drexler. 14 floors above ground, the VMRC executive suite was quiet in that unnatural, padded way of administrative spaces, like it had been built to absorb guilt. The glass partitions gleamed. No one's voice ever rose above a hush. Even the printers sounded apologetic. I was there shadowing the legal rep. Technically, I was still rotating through internal controls, a harmless title designed to let me snoop without raising alarms. I'd convinced myself I could make a difference from inside. Lamont was alone when we entered. He looked tired, worn like a polished banister sheen on the outside splinters just below. There's a discrepancy, he said, tapping the screen without turning it toward us. Line 48, grant ID 971C. Recipient listed as civilian contractor. Under an alias. He said alias like it tasted bad. The legal rep, a wiry man named Dorsey with nervous fingers, leaned forward. Yvonne Drexler. Lamont nodded. That name's linked to field operations in the 2010s. Dorsey mumbled, eyes darting. Paramilitary NGOs. Hard to verify. Lamont swiveled slowly in his chair, opened the safe built into the wall behind him. It clicked like a secret being unzipped. He pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was the metal. I recognized it immediately. The same one Drew had placed on the courtroom table, once polished, once whole. He set it on the glass desk with a careful hand, then reached for a file. As he did, his elbow bumped the metal. It slipped, bounced once on the edge, then spun off onto the tile with a metallic ping. I flinched. Lamont didn't. He bent slowly, picked it up, and placed it back in the pouch without inspecting it. But I saw the bend, subtle, just at the rim. The edge that once caught sunlight now caught silence. He handed the pouch and file to Dorsey. This, Lamont said, is enough to prove fabrication. If she forged credentials, she could have forged this too. Metal or not, it doesn't matter. The records speak. Dorsey nodded too quickly. And the funds, he asked. Misallocated, Lamont replied, eyes narrowing. They never should have been diverted to Valor Care without oversight. It's impersonation and misappropriation. That's how we file it. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't shaking. But he wiped the sweat off his upper lip with a manila folder, and I knew what fear looked like in a man who'd made himself invincible. That afternoon, I passed through records and found the same ledger Lamont had referenced. Someone had flagged it in red, but not digitally, with ink. That told me everything. I turned a corner and nearly collided with Drew in the hallway. She was pushing a medication fridge across the tile, her sleeves rolled up, her hair tied back. There were smudges on her forearms, dust, ink, or maybe blood. I didn't ask. She nodded at me as she passed. Not warm, not cold, just present. She walked like a question no one wanted to answer. 20 minutes later, a courier entered the nurse's break room carrying an envelope. He looked young, nervous, eyes scanning for someone in charge. Drew was at the counter fixing the fridge again, hinges squeaking like bad knees. She turned as he approached. Yvonne Drexler, he asked. She glanced at the envelope. Sure. He handed it over and left. She stood there a moment. The room was quiet. A fridge beeped somewhere in the back, unnoticed. She opened the envelope, read the subpoena, and placed it on the counter. Then, without a word, she bent down, picked up her tool again, and tightened the hinge until the door closed with a soft click. Behind the counter, I stood frozen. There was something sacred about her silence. She didn't argue, didn't shout, just kept fixing what was broken. By the time I arrived, the courtroom was already full. Rain ticked softly against the tall windows, streaking the glass like watercolor. The oak benches creaked as people leaned in and whispered, their bodies turned toward the front, not toward the judge or the prosecutor, but toward the still figure at the defense table. Drew sat alone. Her suit looked the same charcoal gray, too plain to flatter, but her skin was paler than before. Her hands rested gently on the tabletop, fingers barely touching. She stared not at the prosecutor, nor at the judge, nor at the gallery filled with her doubters, but at the empty rectangle on the table where the wooden box had been. It was gone now, taken into evidence under examination, sterilized and archived, like everything else that didn't quite fit. I took my seat in the second row. My jaw ached. I hadn't realized I'd been clenching it the whole ride here. Judge Callow entered promptly. Her robe moved like armor, creased but precise. She adjusted her glasses with the tip of one finger and sat. "Let's proceed with final arguments," she said. Jarvan stood with his usual flourish, brushing non-existent dust from his blazer. "Your Honor," he began, "the defense has provided no documentation, no verifiable credentials, no official placement for Ms. Evanson within any medical division of the United States Armed Forces." He moved toward the jury box, though there was no jury in this type of proceeding. The medal, while certainly evocative, is not one we can trace to any official commendation list. The name Yvonne Drexler appears only in fragmented civilian contractor logs, and those, too, lack clarity. He turned to face Drew. The question remains, is she a hero misplaced, or a fraud who took advantage of chaos? Drew did not move. Judge Callow tilted her head. She tapped her pen once, then looked at the court clerk. "Ms. Harvin," she said, "please bring the object into chambers. I'll need a closer review." There was a stir. Jarvan blinked. "Your Honor." "I am not convinced," she said, her voice level, "that we've examined every angle." She adjourned for recess. The room slowly emptied, voices hushed now, not from formality, but from curiosity. I remained in the hall outside chambers, pretending to scroll through my phone. But my eyes kept drifting to the far end, where a sliver of light spilled from under the door marked Judicial Archive Access Only. 23 minutes passed. Then Judge Callow re-entered the main courtroom alone, carrying the medal. She placed it gently on a square felt pad before her bench. "This medal," she said, "has a code etched near the lower ridge." Her voice had changed, not in volume but in weight. "It's not standard issue, not even custom commission." She paused. "There's a symbol here, a tri-rune design burnished almost invisible without UV enhancement." From the back row I heard a sudden intake of breath. "Shepherd." He stood uncertainly, then approached the bar hesitantly. The bailiff moved to block him, but Judge Callow raised her hand. "Let him speak," she said. He opened his phone, shaking. I saw that symbol on an old photo. My mom had a folder she kept in the laundry room drawer, hidden under the sweaters." He turned the screen toward her. It showed a grainy photo, 4 people in fatigues standing near a field tent. A woman on the left, younger hair tied back. Drew. On her shoulder, a barely visible patch with the same tri-rune emblem. Judge Callow studied the screen, then the medal, then back again. Slowly, she turned to Drew. "Who gave you this?" she asked. For a moment, nothing. Just the soft tapping of rain against the glass and the low buzz of the ceiling lights. Then Drew spoke. "No one," she said quietly. "I kept it after it fell from someone dying." The words landed like a dropped coin, small, final, unpolished. Callow closed her eyes briefly. "I'll issue a sealed request," she said at last, "to summon Marvin Clay, retired field medic. Emergency witness status." Jarvan tried to object, but she overruled him with a single lifted hand. Then gently, she placed the medal back in its pouch. The courtroom was silent. No one moved. As the bailiff called recess again, I realized I was still holding my breath. April 2022. Leon County Courthouse, late afternoon. The light had changed. By the time they called the next witness, the sun had slipped behind clouds, and the rain that had pattered gently all morning now struck the windows in rhythmic bursts, like a metronome losing patience. The courtroom lights flickered on, not the grand chandeliers of courtroom dramas, but soft fluorescence that made the space feel suddenly small, enclosed, almost intimate. And then he walked in. Marvin Clay didn't enter like a civilian. He entered like a man still listening for mortars in the distance, shoulders straight, spine firm, boots quiet on the tile. He carried a simple folder, creased and faded, tucked beneath one arm. He didn't ask where to go. He didn't wait to be sworn in. He stepped forward, stopped just behind the witness rail, and placed the folder there with quiet care. "I don't need oath or script," he said. "Just history." Judge Callow inclined her head. "Proceed, Mr. Clay." He nodded once slowly and began. It was Kandahar. Summer of 2015. I was assigned forward triage with SOT Med embedded unit. We were supposed to rotate every 6 days. We stayed 14. He looked at no one in particular, just the middle air of the courtroom, as though replaying each frame of the memory. 72 hours, no evac. Supplies dwindled. Med officer gone KIA on day 2. I was the last medic still breathing. A pause. His jaw flexed. That's when she showed up. He turned his head. His gaze met Drew's, not dramatic, not cinematic, just recognition. As if seeing someone after a long shift and no sleep. She wasn't on any roster. No name, no patch, no salutes. But she had gloves, tools. She cleaned wounds like she was born doing it. Gave orders without raising her voice. He reached into the folder, pulled out a folded page yellowed with blurred stamps, held it up for Callow. This, he said, is a mission excerpt. Stamped OT Med. 2-5 KD. Date and coordinates match the medal in evidence. He tapped the corner. That code on the rims, it matches the E-unit notation unlisted Civ Med extension. The kind we used when things went real bad and real quiet. He turned the page over. There's more. A small note half the size of the main document, handwritten in block letters, ink smeared at one edge like it had gotten wet or bloody. It read, "If I don't make it, give this to the woman who held the line." Marvin's voice cracked only slightly. I never knew who wrote it. Never found a name. But we all knew who it meant. He placed the note beside the record and stepped back. No one spoke. Not the prosecutor. Not the clerk. Even the court reporter's fingers hovered over the keys, like afraid to break the moment. Judge Callow leaned forward, picked up the record, studied it, then gently placed it aside. She reached for the medal, held it between thumb and forefinger, turned it slightly under the lights. Then, in a voice quieter than any she'd used before, said, "This court finds no fraud, only omission, and perhaps shame." Her gaze moved to Drew, who had not shifted once during the entire testimony. And then Callow did something that, as far as I know, no courtroom rulebook would have recommended. She rose, walked slowly down from the bench, one careful step at a time, her robe trailing behind her like dark water. When she reached the defense table, she stopped. No podium. No podium. No ceremony. Just a moment. Then she extended her hand and placed the medal, still slightly bent, still silent, into Drew's open palm. Drew blinked once, closed her fingers around the medal. That was it. The session was over. No applause, no headlines. Just a soft creak of benches as people rose, unsure whether to look away or bow. Outside, the rain still fell, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. April 2022. VMRC lobby morning. It had rained all night. By morning, the air was thick with damp and pine. At the Veterans Medical Regional Center, the floor near the entrance still bore faint boot prints. Someone had laid out orange cones and a yellow mop sign, but no one had gotten around to cleaning them up. I arrived early, unsure why. Maybe I thought someone would say something. Maybe I hoped the admin staff would issue a statement or a newsletter would appear in the lobby with a headline like "Local Hero Reinstated." But there was no announcement, no press, no ceremony, just quiet. A janitor adjusted the blinds near the mural in the main lobby, a mosaic of veterans in different uniforms, arms crossed, eyes forward. The morning sun filtered through frosted glass, casting long rectangles of pale light across the floor. I stood at the corner near the coffee cart watching the front doors. At 8:03, Lamont Griner walked in. He wasn't flanked by assistants or legal counsel. No suit today, just a windbreaker, zipped halfway slacks that had seen too many press conferences, and shoes that squeaked slightly as he walked. He carried something in his hand wrapped in waxed deli paper. He passed the front desk without a glance, turned left into the hallway that led to the staff break room. No one stopped him. I followed at a distance. Inside the room was almost empty. One nurse, a tech, a humming fridge. Drew sat at the far end, her scrubs clean, her hair pulled back. She was stirring instant coffee into a chipped mug when she saw him enter. Lamont paused. He looked older now, somehow, like someone had turned up the contrast on his face, revealing every crease, every fatigue. He didn't speak, just placed the waxed package on the table beside her. Slowly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his hospital ID badge. Looked at it once, thumb on the edge. Then he laid it down beside the package. Still no words. Then he nodded. Not deeply, not dramatically. Just a single tilt of the head. And he left. The door swung closed behind him, the sound of its slow return louder than anything he'd said, because he hadn't said a thing. Drew didn't move for a long time. Then, almost without thinking, she reached for the badge, turned it over. The back was worn smooth, but in permanent marker barely visible, someone had written a date, 3.9/2015. She looked at the package, opened it. Inside a sandwich, plain turkey and tomato, wrapped tight. She didn't smile, but her shoulders loosened. That was the moment Shepard entered. He had the same walk as Drew, silent, certain, like a person used to going unnoticed. In his hands, he carried a mug. Porcelain. The rim chipped and a sliver of yellow tape wrapped around it in two tight bands holding the fracture together. He sat beside her. She looked at the mug. He saw her looking but said nothing for a beat. Then he spoke. "You never needed to explain." His voice was quiet, different from court, less rehearsed, more sun. I needed to listen. He set the mug down between them. Drew nodded. No reply. Just a shared breath. The kind of silence that doesn't stretch or press, it holds. I watched from just outside the doorway. Drew stood, walked to the row of lockers. She pulled hers open. Inside was the small wooden box. It had been cleaned, dusted. The wood glowed gently in the fluorescent light. She opened the lid, and this time she left it open. The metal rested on soft cloth edges, still bent, still imperfect. Shepard looked at it, then at her. No questions, just knowing. Later that morning I passed the nurse's desk. The wall had been freshly cleaned. Where once there'd been a blank name slot, now a small brass plaque had been screwed in simple and direct D. Evanson, specialist, non-listed. I stood a while. So did Shepard. Neither of us said a word. Outside, the sky was starting to clear. June 2024, Memorial Hallway, VMRC. The press release was short. No quotes, no photos, no commemorative logos. Just 2 lines beneath the VA emblem printed in standard font on recycled paper VMRC. Establishes the Evanson Quiet Grant to support health services for undocumented veterans. Because some names were never written down. That was it. I read it standing by the coffee cart, the same one where I used to overhear nurses half joking about that quiet maintenance woman who fixed everything faster than it. Now they said her name like it was a line in a pledge. It had been 2 years since the courtroom. A lot had changed. Not all of it loud. The west corridor of the VMRC, the one that had once smelled like stale coffee and printer toner, had been transformed. What used to be a forgotten annex now housed the memorial reading space. A few armchairs, a wall of short biographies, a rack of donated novels and local newspapers, and a plaque. It wasn't fancy, just brushed aluminum on the south-facing wall. No photograph at first, just the name Evanson Quiet Grant. Below it etched in smaller font in honor of the unseen work. The repairs no one logged. The patients who never knew who saved them. By July, someone had added a photo. It wasn't an official one, not from any archive or newsletter. Just a still printed from a grainy clip Drew kneeling by a field cot, hands mid-repair, a soldering tool in one glove, the other gloved hand steadying a monitor cable. No caption. Someone no one ever admitted who had carefully taped the metal beneath the photo. Not framed, just taped with 2 strips of clear archival plastic. The edge still bent, still honest. I pass it every morning, not because I have to. My office is in the other wing now, but I walk that hallway deliberately. It reminds me of what's real and what's not written down. And every few days I see someone else standing there. A young nurse in green scrubs, a vet on crutches, a tech pausing with a clipboard half full. No one talks much at that wall. It's not that kind of tribute. Sometimes I catch a note tucked behind the reading rack. One said, "She fixed my brother's chart in 2018. No one believed it mattered. It mattered." Another scribbled on the back of a napkin, "If it's broken, look twice." She did. Shepard works in veteran services now. Part-time, mostly administrative. He says little. But he comes in early, leaves late, stays out of the spotlight, just like her. A few weeks ago, I caught him standing by the plaque. He had something in his hand. That old mug, the one with yellow tape across the crack. I recognized it immediately. The tape had faded a bit, but it still held. He looked at the photo. Then gently he placed the mug beneath it. Not right under, just off to the side. No note, no signature, just a mug left beside a medal and a name that no longer needed defending. Then he walked away. Didn't look back. Didn't have to. The light through the window hit the rim of the mug, just so, casting a small arc of shadow along the baseboard. Later that day, someone moved the mug. Not far. Just repositioned it slightly to fit alongside a new edition, a laminated quote from the hospital janitor of all people. She once told me, "You don't fix things to be seen. You fix them to keep the story going." I never forgot that. I still walk past that plaque some mornings, though not as often now. The mug's still there too, rim-patched with yellow tape catching sunlight like a quiet smile. Maybe that's what grace really looks like. Not awards or verdicts, but small things repaired and left in view. Sometimes bridges collapse so we can learn which ones are worth rebuilding. And in a world quick to forget, I've learned that silence, when paired with truth, echoes the longest. What quiet act of repair has stayed with you the most? Feel free to share or just reflect. And if stories like this resonate with you, feel welcome to follow the journey.